Hello, and thank you for taking the time to share your input on the actions that will shape Dallas' Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan. We'll refer to it as the CECAP for short. Today, we'll provide a brief overview of the steps needed to create a climate action plan. We'll report back on what we heard from the community in May, how we're using that to develop objectives and actions, and we'll end with ways in which you can provide further input. How will Dallas be impacted by climate change? In the previous video, which you can find in the resources section of our website, we talked about climate impacts to Dallas, including hotter days, more intense storms, and poor air quality exacerbated by heat. What does this mean for you? For those of you who have lived in Dallas for a while, you've probably experienced most of these things firsthand already. These impacts will have different and varying levels of impact on our different sectors. Although all these impacts will be felt by our entire community, the burden will disproportionately impact vulnerable communities, which is why a central pillar of the plan is to create actions that lead to equitable outcomes and help these communities to be better prepared. The City of Dallas conducted a greenhouse gas inventory for community-wide emissions in 2015. 64% of our emissions come from buildings and energy, which includes everything from air conditioning, heating, lighting, and cooking. The second largest sector is transportation, which contributes to 34% of all emissions. This includes pollution released by our cars, trucks, buses, trains, and airplanes. Now let's look at how the CECAP can help. The purpose of the CECAP is to improve the quality of life for Dallas residents by creating a healthier and more prosperous community, prepare the community for the impacts of climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, encourage residents and business to take action. What can we do about it? We are considering a range of action. Mitigation refers to actions that reduce emissions and reduce the most severe impacts of climate change. Adaptation refers to actions that help us cope with the impact of climate change that we are already experiencing. For example, preparing our infrastructure to better withstand a storm. Actions like expanding the Trinity Forest do both, since trees remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and absorb rainwater during heavy storms. The CECAP will also include general environmental actions that address issues of greatest concern for communities disproportionately impacted by climate change. An example of this type of action is providing access to food in food deserts. We took your concerns and ideas and drafted some preliminary goals and objectives. The last question of the survey provides an opportunity for you to provide feedback about the goals or any other aspects that are not covered in the survey questions. Here are a few of the great ideas shared. Create easy recycling options for multifamily rentals and homes. Create citizen-led commissions with public funding to solve food desert issues. Give a tax incentive to offices and restaurants that implement green standards. Alternative fuel source for transit. Feel free to pause the video to read all the great ideas shared. We know that great ideas can only become a reality if solutions are rooted in community values that serve Dallasites. Here's an example. A large number of survey respondents thought we should prioritize improving energy efficiency in order to reduce our energy usage and cost. Cities around the country are approaching this problem by setting up energy efficiency retrofit programs. There are a number of ways this could happen. In the survey, you'll see a question which asks, what would most encourage you to improve the energy efficiency of your home? If cost is your largest barrier, you're more likely to rank grants or subsidies as something that would encourage you to participate. Knowing which barriers you think prevent you from making upgrades to your home helps us figure out how to support you. And in this case, we might suggest developing financial tools for building retrofits for low-income households as an action for the plan. If you have other ideas that work towards the goal and objectives of the CECAP, we'd love to hear from you in the survey. Before you dive into the survey, we wanted to give you some more information on what it will take for this effort to be successful and then provide some examples of actions for each of the topic areas the plan will address. It's important to remember that for the CECAP to be successful, we all have a role to play. Residents, business, from restaurants and offices to apartment management companies and industry, and the City of Dallas. Let's talk about some actions. Depending on the results of the survey, we might propose actions similar to what you see in the right column. The list of actions we have in this presentation is by no means comprehensive, but provide examples of what you can expect to see. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll talk through one example action per topic area and how it relates to the draft goal. Feel free to pause this video and spend more time going through each one. Let's begin with energy. Our goal is for Dallas to use renewable, reliable, and affordable energy in order to achieve an objective like encourage grid conversion by investment in and use of renewable energy. The city could promote alternative financing or rebates for solar panels to businesses and residents to help folks pay for the investment. For buildings, our goal is for Dallas buildings to be energy efficient and resilient. One way to meet the objectives would be to implement a benchmarking and disclosure ordinance for large commercial, industrial, and multifamily buildings. For transportation and land use, our goal is for Dallas communities to have access to carbon-free, affordable transportation options. One way to meet the objectives would be to support electric vehicle workplace charging programs and increase the number of publicly available charging stations. For water resources, our goal is for Dallas to protect its water resources and its communities from flooding and drought. One way to meet the objectives would be to create plans for neighborhoods that have experienced frequent flooding. For waste, our goal is that Dallas is a zero-waste community. One way to minimize single-use products and go beyond recycling by enabling communities to reduce, reuse, and repair is to implement an ordinance for business recycling. For food and urban agriculture, one way to meet the objectives would be to implement an ordinance that requires restaurants to donate surplus food to food banks or compost what is not recoverable. For ecosystems and green spaces, which include forests, parks, and urban landscapes, our goal is for Dallas to protect its ecosystems that in turn improve public health. One way to meet the objectives would be to evaluate the potential of existing city parks to withstand flooding. We'd like to invite you to have your say in the survey to hear how you think you can help make these efforts happen and what actions you would like to see in the plan. We'll spend the winter working with the city departments and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee and release a draft of the plan in for you to provide comments on. We're still on track to launch the plan on Earth Day next year, so sign up on DallasClimateAction.com for updates. Thank you so much for tuning in.